Water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. This is the Canada-U.S. Columbia Basin water negotiations.
Broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Hello, this is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. We've made about 6 short videos on the Columbia Basin water area. 3 on the Columbia Basin area itself, and 3 on one of the big basins called the Koocanusa. And there on my website, you can see those because negotiations with the U.S. are coming up. And so in this video, I thought that we'd do a little role play of the negotiators, the American and the Canadian negotiators. And my cameraman has offered to play the role of one of the negotiators. So, Mr. Cameraman up there, what do you want to do? Do you want to be the American negotiator or the Canadian negotiator? What's that? You want to be the American? Why? Because they always win. What do you mean? And I'm not smart enough to be an American negotiator. I'll be the Canadian. Well, okay. Okay, here I am, the negotiator for the U.S. of A. Yeah, that's right, you know, you're not smart enough or tough enough to be a good negotiator. If you look at Canadian-American relations, the Americans have come out on top almost every time. Well, maybe we'll be able to get a little bit better at negotiating things with the U.S. After all, you know, there's not a lot of difference between a Canadian and an American. Well, you know, I suppose that is right. An American really is a Canadian with a gun and no health card. You know, actually the American side is better off than Canadians. And in which way would the U.S. be better off? Well, for one thing, Americans have a lot better, nicer neighbors than Canadians have. All right, where do you want to start on this negotiation thing? Well, we would like to start off by thanking the Tanaka people, First Nation people, for allowing us on their land. Well, for crying out loud, you know they ought to call Canada, Canada. You can't seem to do anything and get it going. You're living in the past. In the USA, we don't live in the past. We thank 2 things. We thank God, and we thank our country. We don't get mired down into the past. The past is the past. Some was good and some was bad, but we've gone on. Canada. You can't seem to get into the modern world. Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. How would you like to start the negotiations? There are 2 words that we would like to have eliminated from these talks. They're inappropriate and unnecessary and never were in date. One word is the word perpetuity. Nothing lasts in perpetuity. We would not be having these new negotiations if we were living with the principle of perpetuity. So we would like that word taken out of the negotiations. There is one other term that we would like to see removed from these negotiations, And that's the term Canadian entitlement. No one is entitled to anything. And the U.S. is not entitled to give away something it doesn't own in the first place. And it is a demeaning, derogatory reference kind of a term. This is strictly a business deal over natural resources. Nothing more and nothing less. It is not a kind of a royalty entitlement that someone is giving to anyone else. If there's any entitlement here involved, it is the U.S. receiving all of this natural water from a Canadian source. So at any rate, let's remove the term Canadian entitlement. It is inappropriate and demeaning. Eliminate both these negatively implied terms from any negotiations. As part of our opening statement from the USA, we would like to say that the USA is a God-fearing nation. And if God had wanted Canada to have the water, he would have had the water flow north. But in the Columbia River, the water flows south into the U.S. as God so ordained. We have a historic principle called the Monroe Doctrine that says that the USA has the moral, God-given right to lay claim to lands and resources within its areas. And we would like to make it clear that God runs the water south, not north. We would like to keep a big picture perspective on these negotiations. We do not want to get sidetracked into a small issue. You know, for example, the building of a weir or the donation of a little bit of community money to people in various communities. We want a big picture taken here. Finally, my negotiating friend, we require respect for the fundamental principle of national integrity. Canada must avoid any agreement that it cannot do things within its own country unless it acquires the okay from the U.S. The United States, for example, would not tolerate another country telling it what it can do and not do within the territorial boundaries of its territories. And similarly, Canada must maintain the same national integrity and have the respect of being able to make its own decisions. No other country should be telling Canada, for example, whether or not they can cut down trees in the riparian zones of the riverbanks of rivers that run within its country. So then, how would you like to start these negotiations from your side? Yes, sir. In any negotiation, you want to start off rough and tough. We already sounded the first blast. We told you Canadians, we don't need this water. We don't need to renegotiate the Columbia Basin. We don't need it. That was meant to scare you. And I'm telling you, it worked. I know that we come at this matter from different perspectives. Perhaps from the American perspective, it's all about water, water, water. But from the Canadian perspective, it's all about money, money, money. And just what are you thinking about in terms of money? There are really 8 areas that need to be negotiated in regard to the water. The first 4 are larger, more continuous areas. The other 4 are important, just as important, but not quite up on the priority scale. So we'll start at the top 4. Let's talk about those, and it all relates to money. The first one is flood control. Whoa, stop right there. We need to talk about flood control. Number one, that was the very first reason for negotiating these reservoirs and dams that we've built on the Columbia system. Let's talk about flood control. And no, we don't feel that it's necessary to talk about flood control anymore with negotiations, not in a major or significant way at least. Flood control has already been controlled. Since when did you hear of a major flood damage from the waters flowing south on the Columbia River system? It has not happened. The dams have been built. The waters are under control in terms of flooding. Don't you think we should be talking about flood control? Moving on with negotiations, Canada needs to get a greater share of the huge monetary advantage realized by the United States from this Columbia Basin waters. And that major monetary advantage is seen in electrical power production. Further, look at the great monetary income from the inland ocean waterway created by the Columbia River waters from Canada. This ocean waterway reaches all the way to Tri-Cities area of Washington, and thus far Canada has not received a single penny from this tremendous economic advantage enjoyed by the U.S. Finally, down here at number 4, consider the billions of dollars acquired by the U.S. from orchard and agricultural production made possible by Columbia Basin waters from Canada. The U.S. Has yet to share with Canada a single dollar of this tremendous income. In the name of fairness and good neighbors, it is time to make an adjustment. How about flood control? On what basis could we make an adjustment? Think about this while we look at Libby Dam, the American dam that floods and drains the Canadian Koocanusa Reservoir each year like your kitchen sink. And just look here how Canadian-based water contributes to the abundance of water near the mouth of the Columbia River and enables tremendous U.S. money generation from both hydroelectric production and ocean-going navigation that runs deep into the interior of the country. Here is a tourist's view, another unpaid advantage enjoyed by the U.S. But beyond tourism, this also shows an ocean freighter deep inland, plying the deeper waters of the Columbia River. Deeper waters and year-around consistent waters, all made possible by the storage dams and increased water flowing from Canada. Here's a couple of pictures of the elevated bridges along the Columbia River, so ocean freighters and tugboats, as you see here, are able to sail up and down the lower end of the Columbia in the U.S. Again, no compensation under the old treaty agreement, and this unfair situation must be corrected if the system is to continue working. Let's look at the proportion of Columbia Basin waters that flow from Canada into the U.S. Measured at the border, that figure is 37%. Therefore, it seems reasonable and fair to say that the tremendous economic advantage enjoyed by the U.S. should be paid at a 37% rate. 37% of the billions of dollars generated from Canadian source waters certainly needs to be negotiated. In all fairness, good neighbor, how does that sound? I think we should be talking more about flood control. It might help you get your mind off of flood control if you look at Revelstoke, where the Columbia River crosses the Trans-Canada Highway, the big bridge there. This is the Revelstoke Dam, and you can take a good highway north a ways up to Mica Dam, which is another big dam that stores water for the U.S. And here's another thought for you. What is the value to the U.S. of all of this vast storage of water in Canada? I think we should be talking more about flood control. Do you want to talk about floods? Well, then just take a look at this flood of information. This chart is about the electrical power produced in the Columbia Basin. The red circle represents the total U.S. electrical power produced in the whole country. And in the top left, it says about 1/3 of all U.S. power is produced in the Columbia Basin on the lines right here. Of this 1/3 that's produced in the Columbia Basin area, both on the American and Canadian sides, about 35 to 45% of that power comes from Canadian waters flowing south. And that 35 to 45%, does that not relate to what I was saying earlier in the video about the waters that flow south? About 37%. So we're right in the range of the 35 to 45% that the U.S. ought to be paying for power that is derived from the Canadian source. We have looked at the top part of the page, so let's talk about the 4 items for negotiation at the lower part of this page. Just a minute. You've got me a little interested in Canada. What kind of water are you sending down to us? Is it hard water or soft water? It would be hard water. It's frozen into ice for most of the year. Say, you know another thing that I heard? I heard that you got a city up there. Wild animals roam the streets. Wildcats and cougars and mountain lions. Is that right? That city, eh? You betcha. We got a city like that. We call it Vancouver. Yeah, you know, I heard that you had nothing but snow and ice up there in Canada. But I also heard that you got these great big animals. I think they're called mosquitoes. Oh yeah, hey, the Vancouver hockey team is called the Canucks, the Vancouver Canucks. And you know, we had in Canada here on the Atlantic side, a big ship hit an iceberg and sunk. It was called the Titanic. So I've got a question for you. What has the Titanic and the Vancouver Canucks got in common? Well, you've got me thinking on that one. What would the Vancouver Canucks and the Titanic have in common? They both looked good until they hit the ice. We better get back on track here and let's get back talking about that flood control. Flood control is already under control. Let's talk about the other things that now need to be addressed. We talked about the top 4 areas. And 37%, remember, might take care a lot of the money situation. Look at ecosystem improvement. This area has been a neglected disaster. This disaster ranges from salmon restoration to cross-border wildlife movement and habitat. Cross-border funding needs to be established for both programs and the monitoring of clearly defined wildlife measures. Also, take a look at control of the dams on each side of the border. Water in the big Canadian reservoirs, these levels fluctuate substantially, particularly in the Koocanusa Reservoir that is eventually drained totally dry each year. Control of water held back and let through by the dams on either side of the border has been an unacceptable domination by the U.S. side. Look at the principles of the way the dams are operated now. The current situation is absolutely unfair and unacceptable. Look at the case of the Libby Dam down here on the American side, where no foreign, meaning Canadian, jurisdiction is allowed. There's no input on when the water needs to be held back or let go by this dam. There is no Canadian input. In contrast, look at the other 3 dams in the Columbia River system, where there is, at least nominally, a joint committee between the U.S. and Canada, where the U.S. is involved, the foreign country is involved in the operation of the dams. This inequity needs to be corrected. Make it the same. Either have no foreign influence in the operation of these dams, as indicated by this particular diagram, or conversely, have the other country be involved in the operation of all of the dams. In other words, on the Canadian dams, there would be joint, that is USA involvement in decisions about the water flow through the dam. And the same would be true of the Libby Dam in Montana. Look at number 3 here, about the resale of water. The increasing practice of reselling Canadian-based water and electric power by Washington to drought-threatened states like California and Arizona must be addressed in a new negotiation treaty. Here is one of several huge dams on the Columbia River on the U.S. side that has made electric power the largest money maker. This has been made possible, in part, through the use of water flowing from Canada into the U.S. And Canada has not been compensated for this number one money generator for the American side. Finally, let's look at number 4. A schedule needs to be identified to enable ongoing negotiations and changes. The 60-year period is totally inadequate. For example, perhaps a 5-year period might be more appropriate. Our planet and water needs are changing. Therefore, shorter times between negotiation sessions are essential. So, Mr. American Negotiator, how does a shorter time period between negotiation meetings sound to you? You know, that would be a good idea. That would give us a little more opportunity to talk about flood control. But you know, we wouldn't have to talk about flood control. You Canadians know how to build pipelines. If you Canadians built a pipeline, water pipeline over onto your dried out prairies of Saskatchewan and Alberta, and put water over there, we wouldn't have such a big problem with water. Or, let's see, maybe I said the wrong thing. Whoa, just wait. Here comes an alert from my negotiation team. It says, attention, alert, delete previous comment by U.S. negotiator. Yeah, well, I guess that would not be a good idea. I apologize. After talking to quite a few people across the Canadian Columbia Basin, We came up with the 14 areas that need to be negotiated in the upcoming water negotiations with the U.S. The items for negotiation are listed on the left-hand side. These items were discussed in the video. How well did we do on them? Did we fail? Was it an okay start? That at least we got started on the negotiation on that item? Or was it quite okay? We're satisfied with it. Which of those three would we check off? Well, stay tuned to this website, I Go Travel with Don Barnett, and we'll check out and see how we did on each of these during the negotiations. We wanted perpetuity and Canadian entitlement, terms that are not necessary and are demeaning. We wanted them removed from the negotiations. We want to look at the big picture. We wanted the principle of national integrity upheld by both sides. Flood control. How did we do there? And then we talk about money. How well did we do for payments for hydro, for the inland seaway enjoyed by the U.S., and the value to American irrigation and agriculture from the Columbia Basin waters from Canada. Water storage, what is it worth? What is the value of it? The ecosystem, how well did we do on that? I hope better than last time. The question of equal dam control needs to be corrected. Can we be successful? The resale of water to California and Arizona, for example, and the resale of power. It's going on. How is Canada compensated for this resale profit enjoyed by the U.S.? And were we successful in getting a shorter time period between negotiation points? All right, as I said, come back, stay tuned in. I Go Travel with Don Barnett is the website.com, and we'll just check out on how we made out on each of these items. We are going to end this session by saying the same thing that the beaver said to the tree that he had just gnawed down. What did the beaver say? So long. It has been a real pleasure knowing you. Water, water everywhere. Wake up, Canada, or there will not be a drop left to drink. Au revoir for now, but we are coming back. This is I Go Travel with DonBarnett.com.